Hello, my name is Clayton, and welcome to episode 136 of the Watch Dog podcast. I'm a professional dog runner and watch enthusiast talking to his pals about dogs and watches. How's everyone doing? Thank you so much for listening. You know, I appreciate it. Yes, we are marching towards spring here. Oh my goodness. The time change just happened a couple days ago. We're in the 60s the early part of this week here in New England. There's optimism in the air that spring and summer are indeed on the way after the blizzard of 26. So I hope you're all doing well. I know we've been guest heavy here for the last month or so. So I figured it was time for some one-on-one with all of you. As you can tell, I am still battling my cold, but I sound much better than I did in the opening of Sanjay Part 2. And I'm feeling much better as well. So thank you. My nose is just kind of clogged. I promise I am not holding my nose as I talk. That's just the way it is. But I hope my voice is a lot more tolerable at least. And I know I missed Watch Soup last week as well because my voice just couldn't do it. We'll hopefully be back this week. There is a link in the show notes to Bobby Leg's channel where we do Watch Soup. So, yep. I don't know if it's going to be Friday this week or if it's going to be Thursday. I'm not sure. But yes, hopefully on Bobby's channel, we do Watch Soup this week again. Speaking of my guests, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Keith, Bobby Legs, and of course, Mr. Two-Parter himself, Sanjay, for coming on the show. Always so wonderful to have those guys on. Hard to wrangle Sanjay these days, as he talked about with his commitment to learning his new job and then his large family. So, hey, had to get him at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I had no idea that was going to be a two-part episode, like I said, but the file was too large, so had to split it up. Amazing talking to him, and hopefully we'll have him on sooner rather than later. All right. Let's get into things here. But before we get into the main topic, I wanted to talk about a watch that was released here just a couple days ago. I don't tend to talk about new releases all that much on this podcast. I like to keep the shows as evergreen as possible. If somebody discovers this episode 2 years from now, I'd like it to be just as relevant as it was the day it was released, which, probably isn't relevant at all. But I like to think of it that way anyway. But, I decided here I'm going to start talking about notable new releases if I have a few minutes in the beginning of each podcast. Probably more interesting than hearing me talk about the weather over and over again. So, there was one I want to talk about that was just released a few days ago as I'm recording this. Jody from Just One More Watch, Jamwa, and his business partner Steven, of course, have the brand Erebus watches. On Friday, a few days ago, they dropped a new watch to their lineup called the 24. It's a field watch, but with a twist. It was inspired by a vintage Gruen that Jody came across a few years ago. The hour markers essentially have cutouts and look like 12 date windows on the dial, right? Numbered 1 through 12. And then at noon, they all flip. And you essentially read the watch in 24-hour time, 13 through 24. All right, I'm someone who doesn't get overly excited by boring watches, so I'm always up for a gimmick. When this video dropped on Friday, I was pretty excited. Erebus, the brand, isn't exactly for me. The Ascent and the Divers that they've done, nice watches. I'm sure they're fine, but just nothing that's ever gotten me overly enthusiastic or excited. And, even though this watch kind of did, I'm still not going to buy one, to be candid. And, I have no affiliation with Jody whatsoever. I just want to talk about it. I'm certainly glad this watch exists, though. I always love a gimmick. I always love something to play with on a watch. Black dial field watches don't necessarily stick around in my collection, but something like this, I don't know. I find it intriguing. However, if you dig into the comment section of the release video, there's definitely some complaining going on. We love to find something to complain about, don't we? In fact, I think we actively search for it. We invent things if they're not there to complain about. Believe me, I include myself in that 100%. I do that, just like all the other watch enthusiasts do. All right, so one of the complaints, there were two main complaints that I was seeing in the comments section. One, I actually agree with, and then the other I think is kind of silly. So let's dig into it a little bit. So from midnight to noon, the dial layout looks like most numeral watches, numbered 12 through 11, right? 12 at midnight, and then so on and so forth. It's what happens at noon on this watch in particular that had some people scratching their heads. And I didn't even think of it until I saw the comment section, and I was like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. Right at noon, or as Jody said in the video, up to a couple minutes after noon, the layout switches to 13 to 24. So it reads oddly in the noon hour, 24 o'clock. Not only does 24 o'clock not exist, it's not at noon, right? We're going to get back to 24 o'clock here in a bit. Noon is 12 o'clock. Many people in the comment section were saying that that switch should actually happen at 1 or 1300 hours, if you will. And I do actually agree with that. This watch is in pre-order right now, so I think it would be smart for them to make that change once they go to production. It does look odd in the noon hour for it to read 24 and not 12. Changing to 13 at 1 o'clock and then going from there just brings it together nicely, in my opinion. I'm hoping Jody actually takes the comment section to heart and just doesn't read the positive comments and actually does that, because I think it would make a difference on the watch. All right, so that brings us to the second major gripe in the comment section on this watch. The fact that there is no such thing as 24 o'clock or 2400 hours. Midnight is actually 0 hours. People think it should be a 0 or a 00 instead of a 24 at the midnight position. People who use 24-hour or military time call it 0 hours. There's someone who works in EMS in the comment section that I saw, and he said it's ridiculous for this watch to have a 24. Those of us in the field who use 24-hour time call it 0 hours. I do find it a little confusing that people are acting like this is the first time they've ever seen it on a watch, though. It's been on field watches and GMT watches forever. The Hamilton Khaki Field. It has the 24-hour time on the inner part of the dial, and it's 13 through 24. Not 0. Several GMT watches have 24 at the midnight position. Arguably the first GMT watch ever, the Glycine Airman, denotes it with a 24. I think, the fact that so many people are pointing it out as a mistake on the 24, the Erebus 24, this watch is called the 24, it's silly, I think. We've seen this a bunch, guys. Jody decided to call this watch the 24, so it pretty much has to have the 24 there. And the Gruen that this was inspired by actually has the same exact layout. 13 to 24 for the PM hours, right? And to me, anyway, having a 0 or 2 zeros instead of a 24 looks pretty silly. I think that's probably why throughout the history of GMT and field watches, they've gone with the 24 instead of the 0. All right, there's a twist now, though. Despite Jody saying this complication has not been used for decades, there is another watch in the pre-order stages right now that I just found out about since the release of the Erebus 24. And that is the Chronogate by a brand called Olton 8. Never heard of this brand. Same sort of idea. A jumping hour watch where all of the hour markers are discs. At noon and midnight, they flip over. The Chronogate uses 0 in place of 24, though, and that's the main difference. Actually has like a little open heart kind of gimmick on it, too, which I don't know. I have to say, though, it doesn't look as goofy as I thought it might, the 0 instead of the 24. The Erebus 24 is a great-looking watch. They have 10 different colorways, and I think it does look awesome. I think that's where people are struggling, because it really is a nice-looking watch, but a lot of people can't get past the fact that it says 24 instead of 0. The Chronogate is, I don't know, it's just a less attractive watch. Like I said, I don't like that open heart key thing on the dial or whatever's going on. I'll post a link to both of these watches in the show notes, and you can decide for yourself. However, if you are somebody who uses 24-hour time and you're a stickler for details, you might want to go with the Chronogate instead if this type of watch is interesting to you. Again, I've had several watches that have 24 on the dial or on the bezel when tracking a second time zone or in a field watch capacity, and I've never had an issue with it, never even thought about it. I guess maybe it sticks out like a sore thumb on the Erebus watch more than it does like on a Hamilton Khaki Field or something, and I guess that's why people are taking issue with it, because you have to stare at it there for half the day, if you so choose to be bothered by it. And I think that's why people are taking issue with it. It's just one of those little quirks, though, that's been grandfathered in on watches for decades, even though 24 o'clock does not exist, right? There's a lot of noise about it in the comment section on Jody's video, though, so we shall see if he decides to make any changes. I'm not sure what he can do. I mean, the watch is called the 24. He's not going to change it to the 0, I don't think. And I think that's dumb anyway. The Erebus 0, I don't know. Leaves itself open to a lot of jokes. A lot of people think this watch and the brand is a 0 anyway, but yeah, you don't have to egg them on. Uh, he said production will already take 6 months due to the mechanism. I imagine any major changes would take even longer, and I don't think we want that either, right? So I guess we'll have to stay tuned to see what Jody and Steven do next with the Erebus 24. Okay, on to the main topic for this week. This is a different type of podcast topic for me, but lately Keith and I and my other friends have been talking about things in the watch hobby that everybody may not know. We've mentioned a few of them here on the podcast, so I wanted to chat further about some under-the-radar watch collecting tips to look out for. I personally have a problem with YouTubers and podcasters telling you which watches to buy, which not to buy, what you should and shouldn't wear, what you should and shouldn't like. So I'm going to try my best to not do that here. No promises. I'm going to try really hard. That bothers me. But these more have to do with the hobby side of things to look out for in the buying process, the shipping process, once you own the watch, that type of thing. Okay? All right, let's go. Let's start with something I know Keith and I have brought up on the podcast before that we're going to dig into a little more detail here. All right, let's say, hypothetical, you want to buy a new watch. You want to buy it used. You don't want to deal with the uncertainty that Chrono24 or eBay might bring, so you start browsing on some of the trusted secondary market dealer websites, you know, the Nashville Watch, Bob's Watches, David DSW, etc., etc. And all of their watches look to be in pristine condition, right? There might be a good reason for that. Some, not all dealers, but some, touch up the finishing and polishing on these watches before displaying them on their websites. If that doesn't bother you, more power to you. Again, I'm not telling you that you should or shouldn't like that. I'm just saying it. A lot of them do. However, I think finishing is one of the perks of buying a luxury watch for those that care, right? The finishing, the polishing, that can often distinguish a very expensive watch from a not so expensive watch. The Zaratsu polishing on a Grand Seiko, hand finishing done on independent watches, even the machine finishing on high-end watches is very good. That's what we pay for. We're paying a premium for that. I know for a fact, at least a couple of the dealers I mentioned a bit ago do touch up watches when they get them. In essence, altering the original finishing and polishing from the brand, right? No harm, no foul if that doesn't bother you. But you know what? It bothers me. So that's why I'm mentioning it here. I want a watch to be in original condition, as original as possible, even if that means some scratches. I want that brand's mark left on the individual watch. I want all the steel or titanium or gold on the watch. You know, what if they do a butcher job? It can look good from a distance, but if you look close up, man, and they butchered it. I don't want that. Few things hurt the monetary value of a watch more than over polishing. Again, I'm not telling you that you should care about that. If you don't, buy with confidence from these sites and don't even ask questions if it doesn't bother you. But if you do care about it, this is just something to look out for. And most of the time, this is the tough part for me anyway, most of the time they're not going to mention it in the listing. If you care, ask them. I have inquired about watches from some of the dealers I mentioned earlier in the past on polishing, and they have come back in email and saying, yes, we did lightly polish it. Keith inquired about a watch last week or the week before, I forget now, from one of the dealers I talked about a bit ago, and he asked if the watch was polished. They came back and again said, yes, we did touch it up. So if you care, ask. I know for a fact that Topper doesn't polish their pre-owned watches. They rate the condition as is. Keith and I mentioned that a few weeks ago. They don't even wash them. They don't clean them. You can see that wrist cheese in the rubber straps on the pre-owned listings, right? I think that's endearing. I like that. Let me get it and clean it myself and wear it from there. I'm fairly certain Del Rey Watch doesn't polish their watches either. I've sold a watch to him in the past, and the watch went up as soon as he got it on their website. Took some photos and put it up as is, and there were scratches on it. So they will rate the condition. Topper is pretty honest. We've said in the past, I think they kind of underpromise. Del Rey, I think, based on experiences from other people who have bought and my watch, which had a lot of scratches. I sold my Moser to him. He put it in as like excellent condition. I wouldn't have rated it in excellent condition personally, but as we talked about with Keith a few weeks ago, that can be subjective. So ask questions, ask for more pictures. It can't hurt. And if they are funny about it, if they refuse, then you know something's up and maybe you should move on to another watch from another seller. So why do dealers polish watches when they get them in? Used watches. Obviously, it looks better on the website to have a watch in pristine condition, right? Watches that are in great condition sell better than those with scratches. Unless, it's marked down so low because of scratches, you can put up with it for the price, right? You're getting a great watch at a discount because it's scratched up. I've done that before. If I'm just going to wear without a care, I don't care about scratches the way a lot of people do. So it doesn't really bother me. So next time you're wondering why all the watches on pre-owned dealer websites look so good, you might know the reason for it now. And here's another tip, and this one might be slightly controversial, and I might risk telling you how to think here, but just be leery of buffing out the scratches on watches yourself. I saw a post the other day where someone really dinged up their bracelet on a Tudor watch. He was asking for advice on what to do. Many, including me, just said, leave it. Enjoy the scratches. I'm always going to tell you that. If you want my advice on scratches, I'm just going to say you're going to put more in anyway, so just leave them and enjoy them. Wear your watches. Some said leave it until you have to send the watch back to Tudor for service and have them deal with it. That's my advice. If I really cared about the scratches on my Air King, I would wait until I had to send it back to Rolex and say, you know what, Rolex, clean it up. Because it's still them doing the finishing and the polishing, right? So I am okay with it in that instance. However, an alarming amount of people said just buff it out yourself. Get a Scotch-Brite pad because the bracelet was brushed. Get a Scotch-Brite pad. That's all you need. One guy said he has done it a bunch with his Omega, Rolex, and Tudor watches, and they look great. I'll just speak for myself here. There's no way in hell I'm doing that to one of my luxury watches. They're way too expensive. I respect the original brand finishing way too much. People that finish watches by hand train for years to be qualified to do that. Some schmuck with a Scotch-Brite pad thinks they can do just as good a job and it looks good. I have my doubts. You are removing metal when you mess with the finishing of any watch. I just can't for the life of me understand doing that over and over again with a Scotch-Brite pad. You're just going to keep scratching the watch anyway. Cape Cod cloths on the polished surfaces of watch is just something I did very early until I realized what I was doing and I stopped. I think I still have some up in my closet, buried in the back of the closet. Again, a lot of people do it. I don't know. I just, no way. People take erasers to titanium surfaces to buff out scratches. I don't know. Even if you go with the grain of the brushing, it might look good from a distance, but close up, it's just not going to look great, in my opinion. Again, if you are okay with doing this and you like the way that looks versus scratches, more power to you. Not me, though. Not me, man. I want it to be as original as possible. So I guess my closing tip here would be whether you're buying from a dealer that might polish and touch up a watch before they put it on their website or a private seller who uses Scotch-Brite pads and Cape Cod cloths, just ask them if they've done it. If you see a watch on, a group you're in or something and it looks to be in pretty good shape, ask them, hey, have you ever used a Scotch-Brite pad on the brushing? Have you ever used a Cape Cod cloth? Have you ever used an eraser on titanium finishing? If the answer is yes, I'm not speaking for anyone else, just me. I would steer clear of that watch. But hey, that's just me. Okay, sticking with the whole buying and selling theme, my next little tidbit is to stay away from lazy sales posts. Not only if you're buying, but also if you're selling, right? We've all seen those type of posts in groups we're in, probably even on eBay or Chrono24. A seller throws up a couple blurry pictures, a one-sentence description maybe, and that's about it. Sometimes no description whatsoever. I've seen those posts in groups I'm in. What do we as buyers do when we see those? I'll speak for myself. I scroll on past. See you later. Yep, like I said, I'm in an online group and I see quite a few of those. No description at all. Sometimes the photos aren't good enough to tell the description. There's no dimension listings, no nothing, right? You're not doing your sales post much justice by not taking the time to sell the watch, right? Whenever I put a watch for sale, I get quite verbose in the listing, maybe a little too verbose, but it makes me feel good. A little history about the watch, my particular watch, of course, but also the watch in general, why it exists, how it exists, the story, right? We love storytelling as watch enthusiasts, so put a little bit of that into your sales post. If I'm selling my Santos, talk about its history. You get the drift. A detailed condition description. Like I said earlier in this episode and with Keith a few weeks ago, condition descriptions tend to be quite subjective, right? My excellent condition is your fair condition. So instead, just be literal. Mention the marks on the watch. Capture them in photos with good lighting. It doesn't really pay to lie in a sales post at all. The person buying it is going to see the watch eventually if they end up buying it. You don't want to deal with the headache of having somebody contest the condition and want to return the watch, right? Be forthright in the description and in the photos you share. It's easy to hide scratches in photos if you want to. Instead, find the lighting that shows them all. Now, I'm aware, and I recently dealt with this, sometimes photos exaggerate scratches because you're shining the light right on the scratches. That's the only way you can notice a lot of these scratches, is shining the light right on them. And in the post listing, then it tends to exacerbate the scratches. Do it anyway. That's my philosophy anyway. I've had that happen where it looks much worse in my photos, and then they get to watch and say, wow, this is in much better condition than I thought. I usually put the disclaimer in, you can't really see these scratches unless they have a light shine right on them. But you know what? It makes me feel better. It makes me sleep at night. And I may even lose a couple $100 off the sale of the watch, but I feel better about it personally. And they're not getting any surprises when they open the box and take out the watch. The only surprise they're getting is that the watch is in better condition than they thought. Pricing is also obviously a huge part of it as well. When I'm posting a watch for sale, I tend to go on eBay and look at what watches are actually selling for, not the listing prices. As we know, people list watches for insane prices on eBay, Chrono24, private group listings, right? Like, oh, you're so out of touch for what this watch is actually going for. So look at the filter where you can see what watches are actually selling for. I'll look at that and then I'll actually price a little below that. I'm like Federico always says, I try to be the cheapest on the internet, the cheapest in America. He always says, that's what I try to do. And this is how I justify it. I always look at it that the money you spent on these watches, however long ago it was, is gone, long gone, right? Getting anything liquid back is better than a watch you don't wear just collecting dust in your watch box. That's my philosophy anyway, especially if I'm buying something new, right? This watch I haven't even thought about wanting to wear in 6 months. You know what? Maybe I lose a few $100 on it, but it's better than nothing and just sitting there. And then I can put that towards something I'll actually wear. We all have different collecting philosophies. Some of us are okay with just owning a watch and not wearing it. As I've said before, that's not me. So I'd rather get some money back and put it towards a watch I will actually wear. I sold a couple of watches here recently in the wake of buying the Girard Perregaux Laureato 50. And I think I'm done selling for now. Oh, I'd like to sell a couple more, but it's honestly just not fun. I did find a couple of great buyers, but the process is just arduous. Ugh. If there's one cure for impulse buying, it's having to sell watches, in my opinion. So if you want my advice, next time you're writing out a sales post, go the extra mile. Add some humor in the description, some flair. Be thorough in your picture taking. Do your best to sell the watch. And who knows, it might actually sell. And when you're buying a watch, look for those descriptions. Look for those posts. 8, 9, 10, 12, 17, how many ever pictures. The more pictures, the better, in my opinion. The more paragraphs in the description, the better, in my opinion. Those are the posts I like to go for and I like to do when I'm selling a watch. Okay, let's say now you found a watch online from a trusted seller who didn't polish or touch up the watch, had a great product listing on the internet, clear, beautifully shot photographs, didn't use a Scotch-Brite pad or Cape Cod cloth on the watch ever. You hit buy now. Now the fun begins, right? They ship the watch to you. Dealers especially will use courier services like UPS or FedEx, DHL, perhaps. In my neighborhood anyway, these services come during the day. Typically, if you buy a somewhat expensive watch, a signature will be required for them to actually deliver the piece, right? We all know how that works. I know you can go in on some of those apps and change the settings, but many of us also don't want an expensive watch just sitting outside on our doorstep for hours on end either. Weather condition, or let's be honest, theft concerns, right? We've all heard of porch pirates. I go into people's houses during the day to pick up their dogs when they're not home. And oftentimes I will see packages out and I bring them in for them because I've had more than one of my clients say, "Hey, did you see a package today?" And I'll say, "No, I didn't." And they said, "Oh man, it must have been stolen." That happens a lot. And, I think during the day in cities, especially thieves target well populated areas because people aren't home. They're at work. Now, that's changed a little bit since COVID and more people work at home, but uh, a lot of break-ins happen during the day. A lot of those kind of things happen during the day because no one's around. And I know now more people have Ring cameras and that type of thing, but it still happens. People can just cover their faces. And as long as their car and their license plates aren't in viewing of the Ring camera, they can get away with it still. So yeah, that's always a concern. And I guess rightfully so, and sometimes annoyingly so, UPS drivers are pretty strict about getting that signature. The UPS, from my experience, it's ultimately a good thing, but yeah, slightly annoying if you really want the watch to be left there and you're not home, right? I have left notes on the door saying it's okay for them to leave it without a signature, and most of the time they don't do it. There have been a lot of jokes and memes about, UPS and FedEx. If they miss delivery, they'll typically leave a little note that says they'll try again tomorrow. I've seen the memes to the effect of where UPS says, "We're sorry you weren't home for delivery. We'll try again tomorrow at the same time when you also won't be home," right? Many of us, like I said, work from home now more than in the past. So if that's the case, it's no big deal. You're home to answer the doorbell when they come, but many of us don't work from home. I'm gone most of every weekday. And if you don't have a spouse that's home that can sign for it either, you don't want to hold them hostage all day either. I've put my poor wife through that before. She has a few weekdays off every week. And if I'm expecting a watch, I'll say, "Oh, it's coming between 12 and 5. It'd be nice if you, could be home for that." And she might have errands she wants to run or whatever she wants to go and do. And she can't because I'm forcing her to sit home and look out the window and wait for the UPS guy or gal. Right? That's not fair either. So what do? There is a solution that I think a lot of people may have not thought about or they're not aware of. And that's have the watch delivered to, let's just say, a UPS store or a FedEx office. I think if you go through the specific apps for those couriers, there are other locations that the watch can get delivered to as well, like a Walgreens or a CVS. Do your research on the apps or websites depending on the courier used. When I buy from Topper, they have my local UPS store as my main address now. It's stress-free. It's amazing. I don't have to worry about racing home to meet the UPS driver or tracking them down in my neighborhood if I missed the delivery. On the UPS app, you can actually see the little UPS truck on the map in your neighborhood, and I have missed the delivery before, and I'll track them down. It's kind of stalkerish, right? We are obsessed with our watches, though, and we don't want expensive watches sitting on a truck more than they have to, bouncing around, getting schlepped back to whatever facility, and then back on the truck the next day. We want the watch, right? UPS store. The Gerard Perigo I bought a few weeks ago was the most expensive watch I have ever purchased. I had it delivered to the UPS store near my house, and it was totally stress-free. It arrived there at like 9:30 in the morning. I went and picked it up after work. All you have to do is show your ID. They bring you the box, you sign for it, and you walk out the door. It's beautiful. They don't charge you. I can't promise none of them will charge you, but mine never has. Never. And they know me now, actually. One time the woman actually called me and said, "Your watch is here," or "Your package is here." I'm not sure she knew it was a watch, but she said, "Your package is here." Yeah, they're like my friends now, which is probably a sign that I buy too many watches. It's usually a few months between purchases now, at least, and they still know me well. So imagine if I went there when I did a lot more impulse purchasing than I do now. They might stage an intervention for me. But yeah, it's great. Keith had this happen recently with a watch he purchased as well. He was stressing about being home for delivery. It was delivered through FedEx. He went on the app and switched to having it delivered to a FedEx office. It was delivered there, and he went and picked it up after work. Beautiful. Like I said, it's a fantastic option for those that work away from home and don't want to hold loved ones hostage all day waiting for the UPS or FedEx guy and gal, right? It's awesome. I highly recommend doing this. I'm not sure about DHL and if they have any, local drugstore or areas, but it's worth researching if DHL is your courier. But I know FedEx and UPS; these are certainly options, and yeah, worry-free delivery. And then just a few other tidbits that are probably obvious, but I'll mention anyway. All right, let's just say you pick up your watch from the UPS store or FedEx location and you love it. But you're not so fond of the bracelet or strap it comes on, right? So you switch it out. I always talk about embracing scratches on my watches. I don't love scratching my watches when I'm sizing the bracelets or changing straps, though. That's something I can actively prevent. I beat myself up about that, right? I can be really hard on myself if I am changing a strap and I scratch the watch. Oh, I hate that. Or sizing a bracelet. Oh, man, it bothers me. So if I'm changing a strap, I tape the back of the lugs. Not all the time, but especially when the tolerances on the spring bars are a little tight. Tudor and Rolex for sure. Some other watches as well. If I get a used watch and there are some marks there on the back of the lugs, I don't really mind all that much, but it's pretty easy to prevent. Just a piece of Scotch tape, even. No matter how careful you are, spring bars, we all know this, can have a mind of their own, right? They can go flying across the room. They can come back on you. I used to use blue painter's tape, but that can get a little clumsy. Scotch tape is easier to work with, for me personally anyway. Again, a little extra effort that can go a long way. And I also try, if I know a spring bar could come back, I try to prevent it from going through the top. I'd rather have it come back out the back because you can actually scratch the top of the lugs on the head of the watch. And then it's noticeable while you're wearing the watch. Yeah, I've done that before. I did that early on when I just got into changing straps. I had no idea what I was doing, and I realized, oh man, I was really dinging up the front of the lugs on the watch. So yeah, if you want to scratch anything, it's the back of the lugs that nobody sees and that you don't see on a regular basis. But yeah, that can be prevented too with a little tape. All right, and then when we have a fully polished watch, especially if it's brand new, we like to photograph it, right? It's easy to fingerprint up a fully polished bezel and case. So we obsessively wipe them off with some sort of microfiber cloths. A tip I learned from Sanjay a long time ago is to take very good care of those microfiber cloths we use. Particles of dust and dirt can get on them. What do those particles tend to do to polished surfaces? Scratch them, right? One little grain of sand or dirt or something can be a nightmare if it's on a microfiber cloth and then you wipe it on your polished surface. That will scratch it up completely. Let's say, hypothetical, you take your dive watch to the beach. You get home, there's some sand and detritus on it. You wipe it off with a microfiber cloth. The next day, you get a brand new, fully polished Grand Seiko. And you notice there's some fingerprints on it when you're taking your Instagram photo. So you use that same microfiber cloth you used on the diver and you wipe down your GS to spruce it up. Then you look and, oh no, you scratched it up completely because there was sand left on the microfiber cloth. I do keep mine in a sealed Ziploc bag and try to limit the watches I use them on. Sanjay did have a washing method, just, maybe rinsing it underwater and then just letting it dry. But again, keep it free from dirt and particles or else it will scratch up your watches. I don't even wipe my watches down anymore. I don't post on Instagram or even wrist shots all that much. So I really don't even bother with wiping them down all that much. If you do, Sanjay gave me a recipe for this concoction he made of no rinse car wash and water in a spray bottle. I did make that concoction about 3 or 4 years ago, and I still have some left in a spray bottle up on my desk. Every so often, if one of my watches looks dirty, I'll just spray a little bit of that into a clean cloth and then wipe down my watch. I think it was like 1 ounce of the no rinse car wash solution mixed with water in a large spray bottle. It does a good job and it does go a long way. It will not damage your watch in any way. All right, well, I think I'll leave it there. But those are just a few things that we may not think about all the time that I thought might be helpful to pass along. Maybe I'll call this episode Unsolicited Watch Advice. So the next time you go through this whole process, picking the right watch with the right description, making sure you're fully aware of its service history and refinishing history, getting it shipped to your house and getting it on your wrist. Maybe you'll think about these things and say, you know what? Old Clayton wasn't an idiot after all. He did have a point with the things he said. Then maybe ask yourself why you're listening to this podcast at all. Whatever your reasoning is for listening, I certainly appreciate it. Love to hear from you, of course. You can reach out on Instagram, send me a private message on there. I'm usually very quick to respond. This episode gets released as a YouTube video. You can leave a comment on there. I'll respond. And I always say it, you can text the podcast. I won't be able to text you back, but I see it. I read it. I'm not being rude. However you reach out, I appreciate it very, very much. The podcast is growing. I'm so grateful for your support. I love hearing from my old friends, from new friends, and seeing the numbers go up every single week of people listening. So, oh man, let's keep it going. Let's keep the momentum going. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And remember, sometimes you're the dog, sometimes you're the hydrant, but hey, at least you're outside. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Watch Dog Podcast. See you later.